a smile that makes my temperature rise, like a summer with 1,000 Julys. You intoxicate my soul with your eyes, and I'm certain that this heart of mine hasn't a ghost of a chance in this crazy romance. You go to my head, you go to my head.
Had my lunch all alone, waited for you to phone. Said you'd call me at 2. So about 20 of 3, I had cocktails with Lee. Baby, I don't cry over you. Stood me up in the rain, tried to hurt me again. Bet you thought I'd be blue. I went out to a show with a swell guy named Joe. Baby, I don't cry over you. These foolish games you keep playing might work with somebody else, but I could have told you right from the start, no man's a man enough to break my heart. If you don't come tonight, think you'll give me a fright. Tell you what I will do. I'll put on my best gown and go painting this town. Baby, I don't cry over you. These foolish games you keep playing might work with somebody else, but I could have told you right from the start, no man's a man enough to break my heart. If you don't come tonight, think you'll give me a fright. Tell you what I will do. I'll put on my best gown and go painting this town. Baby, I don't cry over you. Listen, Jack, your sweet Jill will be out with some bill. Baby, I don't cry over you.
I'm as restless as a willow in a windstorm. I'm as jumpy as a puppet on a string.
Literally. Oh, you have one? That's so funny.
How did they fit all those letters?
Oh, I know.
And you got the color. Excellent.
I'm telling everybody to watch me on television right now.
Oh, yeah. Scantron test to make sure that it works.
It was a fundraiser or a fund? What was it? I think it was a fundraiser. A fundraiser?
That's hilarious. And then you find out there's a $6 section.
I know, right?
How much were the loans? When was it? Oh, yeah. Just trying to ignore you like I did the mall. That's all.
You totally are. All the way into
Here, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I get to talk about
I've been in the mall since like 2000.
I've been talking.
Yeah.
What is it?
drugs. And then if all
Rain or rush? Because I didn't stop.
if you were planning,
Yeah.
if you were planning,
No, I'll definitely mention this, yeah.
She didn't like this.
I'll mention that.
It's not an agenda.
A lot of important
Thank you so
I'm
much.
gonna train you. How long it takes me to stop? How does it go? Physics.
That's one of my favorites.
Well, you know, we were
Coming to see how like
trying to color the website.
you mean abusive.
Oh, yeah.
Paul wants to be in shadow. We
No,
want Paul in
no,
shadow.
no.
You want this light on?
Let's keep him dim.
So people can see.
I don't even know what that did.
I think they're way back.
What is that like?
Oh, okay.
Like for the school.
Yeah, that lights up my
This
left side
random girl
profile.
goes to the you want she's a junior. When they're one of them, she's a junior because
Oh, that sets
for
the
us
mood,
it's
Ronnie.
like
Thank you.
and like
I hear free I hear free
yeah, so like basically and like basically like I would say like the majority of us were like they're Aiden because they're like in the same friend group and like most people are from and like tragedy of the third party Victoria won because like the votes were split between Aiden and Kaylee. So like Kaylee ended up getting vice president even though I've like see look at that.
Oh, all right. Well,
It's just like
you pulled it back.
he is like the historian.
Unlit.
Light
Now,
up
if
your.
you press the
Let's see
button,
if
you
she.
should shut me down.
Did I?
That's a great number. That is a great
And
number.
now you're unflashed. Okay.
Okay.
Is this the same kid?
Just me.
Yeah.
And we already got the other one.
Next time I'm on Monday, and that's when our student council meetings are, so I
I'm
never.
gonna go on a limb,
When this is ready, really?
but not by much.
Is it like for us?
Not by much.
Everybody is in student council. Yeah, I think that's how it is for us.
And the longer we keep not spending money,
Now there's. You got the order.
All right.
It's already sent in. Vegas odds got it.
Okay, all right. You guys psyched?
Absolutely.
Okay. Good evening. Buenas noches. Just in honor of Mark. Okay. That's what I should do in Chinese. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education meeting. I did not actually notice about the speakers, but meanwhile, could we have a call the roll, please? Annie?
Mrs. Blanks?
Here.
Ms. Exum?
Here.
Dr. Greenberg?
Here.
Mr. Paul Yoop?
Here.
Mr. Sarzan?
Here.
Mr. Zdanowitz?
Here.
Student Representatives Grace Andrews? Here. And Maddie Pliskin?
Here. Mark Overmeyer Velasquez apologizes. He has work and he can't come, but he sends his greetings. Whoever led it last time, would the other of you mind leading the pledge this time?
United States of America and
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There's no revision to the agenda order that I know of. Is there any public communication? Did anybody? No one has signed up. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Oh, please. Just remember to state your name and your address.
Do you have to turn anything on?
I think it should work automatically.
John Joyce, 170 South Main Street. I want to come and thank you for serving for another year. And I had some thoughts about the opening. And it's taken off of a poem by Gilbrand. It's on children. You're probably familiar with this. But your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backwards, nor tarries for yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, and that his arrows might go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. So I've adapted it to, on students. Your students are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come to you, but not from you. And though they are with you, they do not belong to you. You may give them your curiosity, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You may borrow them, but not steal their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backward nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your students as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees his mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows might go swift and far. Let his bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, he also loves the bow that is stable. I wish you best on your endeavors for the year, and I hope that you particularly pay attention to the people that are not moving up the ranks and the statistics and the marks, because they matter. And unfortunately, my schedule conflicts, so I can't see you that often, but it's a pleasure to say hi again.
Thank you so much. Exactly. Welcome back. Thank you. We have no unfinished business and no formal new business, and so we're going to move on to staff communications and reports. Before I call on Tom to give the superintendent's report, I just want to say that in something that did not surprise any of us except Tom, he was honored by the Bridge with their Build No Fences Award, which recognizes his incredible contributions to making life better for children and families in schools and in the community. I can't imagine a more deserving person, so even though you were surprised, actually really no one else was. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. I can think of a lot of more deserving people, but that was very nice, and I was honored, and thanks for, thanks for noticing. Speaking of good news, last week, both of our high schools were notified of their National Merit semifinalists, which every year, 1.6 million test takers basically take this test, and there's not the cutoff actually goes by state. So Connecticut has the second highest cutoff score, and it depends on population because they want a percentage from each state. So it's not the same everywhere. But of those test takers, 180 current seniors in Connecticut were recognized, 4 of them from West Hartford. So congratulations to Tesora Chang from Hall, Katie Kopp from Conard, Jack Moore from Conard, and Doug Olmsted from Conard. So congratulations and good work. Other things coming up that you should be aware of or people in the community might see. Morley, as you know, we've done roofing work on Morley during the summer, and there's one last piece that has to happen, which is the heating and ventilation units have to be taken off, moved, and so there'll actually be cranes there on 2 weekends. The weekends of Friday, September 22nd, a crane will get delivered after school and will be removed early Monday morning. And then on Friday, October 6th, crane will be delivered late Friday afternoon and removed early Monday morning. Nobody can be on school grounds at that point while the crane is there working. But we'll have signs up. We're letting the community know now. But just if people are wondering what the crane's there for, it's the culmination of some summer work. I also want to mention Jewish Family Services is sponsoring a showing of Screenagers, Growing Up in the Digital Age, a film, Wednesday, October 18th at the JCC. That will be from 7 to 8:30. It's free to anybody that wants to attend. There'll be a panel discussing the film afterwards and what it means to raise our kids in the digital age. So we just talked about National Merit semifinalists. Wednesday, October 11th is PSAT day at our high schools. So at both schools, they'll be taking PSATs. While we wish them well in that, as you know, it's 9th, 10th, and 11th grade now that take that. It actually changes the high schools to a full day, so they can get the day in. So that's the one of the Wednesdays that is not a full day, just at the high school. The other schools follow the same Wednesday schedule. And just a reminder, this Thursday is Rosh Hashanah. No school, and happy Rosh Hashanah to all observing. So that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think we're going to move directly then to the report about 2017 school day SAT results.
Yes. I'll bring Paul up, and Ann's coming up also. And this is the time of year, we spent a lot of time, I talked a little bit about it last week, really breaking down where we are, what we're doing. And we finally got year-to-year comparisons, which we've been waiting for. And, I've said all along that West Hartford will be informed by our test scores, but we won't be driven by them. But I want people to know, doesn't mean we ignore them, and we look at trends. And now the SATs, because they relate to the classroom, because they are the state assessment, we pay probably closer attention to them than we ever have in the past, because we've never seen it as something that we've prepared students for, but inherently now, theoretically, we are. Not theoretically, we are, factually. So I will turn it over to Paul with the understanding that there's a lot of good news in this report, and we've looked at it by school by teacher, and he'll give you some details.
Thanks, Tom, and good evening. Glad to be able to present to you again, and welcome to Grace and Madeline. I didn't get the pleasure to meet you at the first meeting. And again, I'm joined by Ann McKernan, the Director of Secondary Education. And we both, I think, I speak for us both when I say we are extremely excited to present this report to you this evening. This is simply a good news story from beginning to end, and it is a reflection of a lot of hard work of educators in the district, teachers at all levels, instructional leaders, principals, in support of Board Goal 1, which is your goal to advance achievement for all students and to reduce disparities between and among groups. And I think that you will hear very clearly how that is manifesting. The format of the report should be familiar to you. I'm going to follow a similar structure from what we've done in the past. I'll give you a very brief reminder on background to the changes of the SAT before we dive in and look at the overall test results. We'll talk about, because the SAT is, as Tom mentioned, now a state assessment, we'll talk quickly about the state defined performance levels 1 through 4, and then we will look, as you've requested last year, we'll look at the results disaggregated among different state defined categories before we open it up for any and all of your questions. So I'll begin again just with a very quick overview of some of the differences in the SAT. This is not the same SAT that we took, that our students will be taking. In 2016, the College Board implemented the plan that it had announced to revamp and refocus the SAT on the content that matters the most for college and career preparedness. Kind of just a highlight of some of those differences that you read in the report. The most recent old SAT, what I'd call version 2 from what we'd be used to, had 3 sections. Had critical reading was one that you're probably familiar with, mathematics and reasoning, and then there was a writing test, and there was an essay that became a major focus of the writing test. In 2016, that went away to 2 sections, and they call it evidence-based reading and writing. They put those together. A straightforward mathematics section. And the writing component, the essay, does still exist on the SAT, but it's not part of school day SAT. Students may elect, it's an optional component of the test, they may elect to take when they retake the SAT as either a junior or a senior, assuming they choose to do so. Overall, the big changes really, it's words and context, command of evidence, analyzing sources within literacy. In math, it focuses on 3 big areas: algebra, problem solving, and advanced math. There's much more emphasis on informational literacy, problems grounded in real-world context and analysis in science and social studies. Page 3 of your report, I believe, really has a good table that describes those differences. But the other thing that changed with it that I'll mention very briefly and move on is the meaning of the benchmark score. In the past, the benchmark score really stood for a 65% likelihood for an incoming freshman in college to be successful in their first semester of their entire program of study. And that level of rigor was increased on the change to the benchmark score and focused. So now it is a 75% or better likelihood of being successful in an introductory content-based course. So benchmark in math presumes success in your first year math course in college, and benchmark in evidence-based reading and writing presumes your success in an English composition type course in college. And so those are some of the changes from what you and I would think of as a benchmark score. But that gives us a good segue to look at them. What are these benchmark scores, and how did we do as a district? So there's a lot of information on the graphic, and I'll explain it briefly. The first are the heavy horizontal bars. Those represent the benchmark score cutoffs for evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics. A 480 for the literacy component and a 530 for math. Those are the scores that students are hopeful to achieve. And that's a 12th grade benchmark. So again, we want to think about our results. We're measuring our juniors on that 12th grade benchmark. there are 3 distinct groups of students and 2 years of data up there. The bars that are in blue that begin is the performance of West Hartford students. And the bar on the left in lighter colored blue are the 2016 results, and the one immediately to the right of that in the darker color are the 2017 results. Adjacent to that, moving down in orange, we'll see the results of our DIRG, again for 16 and 17, and then on the far right you'll see the results for our state in gray. Okay. Overall, this is a very good news story. You can see the trend clearly across all the different groups. There were slight increases, but the West Hartford increases were more dramatic than observed in the DIRG and certainly in the state. Overall, we had a 28-point gain between the 2 tests, 14 points on average in literacy and 12 points on average in math. That triples the gains of the states, and it's 1.5 times the gains of the DIRG. And you can see that we're very competitive in terms of our overall performance with the towns that we hope to compete with in terms of having folks come to live here. What does that translate into in terms of students, the percentage of students that are reaching that SAT benchmark score? So this is looking strictly at the percentages of students that hit that 480 or that 530 respectively. Again, the same setup, West Hartford in blue, DIRG B in orange, and the state in gray. And quite simply, we're observing that roughly 81% of our students are hitting that benchmark for literacy. 61% of our students are hitting that benchmark for mathematics. And looking at the 2 groups together, 60% of our students are hitting both literacy and mathematics, not reflected there. The size of that gain, again, you could see the state for literacy, for instance, was relatively flat. We had a 5% gain in both literacy and mathematics, and a 5% gain in students that achieved both. So overall, a very good news story, and again, it compares very favorably with DIRG B. Being a state assessment, they take that rather than just saying you met the college and career ready benchmark or you didn't. They break that into 4 levels of performance, and these correspond to the same 4 levels of performance that are now used in grades 3 through 8 for our literacy and math assessments. Level 1 corresponds to students that did not meet goal. Level 2 you're approaching, 3 you have met, and 4 you've exceeded. So looking at this, our MET category, obviously translating it back to the scores, in order to hit that MET goal to get to the green or the blue, you have to score at least a 480 on the literacy assessment. You have to score a 630 to get into exceeded. That represents the top 20% of test takers nationwide. And the level 1 is at a score point of 410. That area in red represents the lowest 10% of test takers nationwide. So as a district, West Hartford, we had very strong performance. We had 8% of our students in the level 1 category, 11% of our students in level 2, 48% of students in level 3, and 33% of students exceeding in level 4. That places us overall in the top 25% of districts in Connecticut for our performance in literacy, which is a huge jump from where we were in literacy last year. In math, as you've already heard on the other slide, the benchmark score is numerically higher. It's at a 530. So you need to hit the 530 in order to reach level 3. You need to reach all the way to a 650 to get to a level 4. That again represents the top 20%. And it's the same score of a 410 at a level 1. And that again represents the lowest 10%. And again, we had very strong showing. We had 11% of students in level 1, 28% of students in level 2, 37% of students in level 3, and 23% of students in level 4. And what's interesting is while that distribution of scores looks very different and you think that might be a negative, the results are actually more positive than in literacy when looking across the state, as they were last year, but they increased again, and this year we're in the top 20% of districts across the state of Connecticut relative to our math performance overall. So it's extremely exciting story looking at things in the aggregate. Obviously, we know where our challenges lie. Our challenges lie when disaggregating some of this data. And so we'll talk about categories that are defined by the state of Connecticut. And with the new accountability system, the state changed to what it refers to as a high needs category of student, where it pools 3 different groups of students together. Students with disabilities, English language learners, and socioeconomically disadvantaged as identified by students who participate in free and reduced lunch. So all of those students are pooled together. That's done intentionally so that smaller districts that typically don't have a sufficient number of students in any one category can still be held accountable and report on things. We've always had enough students, but this is how the state does it. And so let me explain the graphic, because I don't know, the small print at the bottom might not be legible to you at a distance. Our student performance for our high needs group in West Hartford is represented in blue in the middle bar. Okay, the comparison group underneath that in orange are the West Hartford students not in the high needs. So two groups that you're either in the high needs group, you meet one of those three criteria, one or more, or you're not. The group in red is the comparison group for the state, the high needs group for the state. So we can see how our students in the high needs group compare to their peers, and we see there's a sizable gap. It's about, on average, looking across the two tests, it's about 43%. But we can see how they outperform high needs students across the state. Now, what that tells us, hey, that's nice, we still have a lot of work to do. But here's the really exciting part, is how that compares to last year. So these vertical bars represent the performance of those groups, different cohort of students, from the previous year. So in red at the top, you can see that the state, pretty much top and bottom, you can see that the high needs group at the state level had relatively flat performance, didn't change. Whereas we have this very dramatic increase for our high needs students in literacy. That's a 10-point gain just looking at the blue bar. That's offset by a 2-point gain for students not in the high needs group in literacy in West Hartford. So overall, we shrunk the achievement gap within literacy by 7.9%. That's dramatic. That's just huge. And it's an equally good news story in math. Our high needs group had a jump in performance by 6%. 6% more students in that category met the college and career ready benchmark for mathematics, offset by a 4% gain. Hey, we had a great gain for students not in high needs in math, 4% gain. So it's a net of just about 2% gain, shrinking of the gap. And on the left-hand side in blue, that averages out to about a 5% shrinking of the gap among the high needs group here in West Hartford. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just an outstanding story. It is really attributed to the hard work of a lot of people behind me and definitely in the schools. And it moves beyond our high needs. I know that the board has asked if we can continue to report in and along race categories as defined by the state. Because the 11th grade test is just one grade and has a smaller number of students in it, I took the liberty, and I hope no one is offended, to group some of the race categories that have been significantly lower than their peer group. So I've grouped together in blue, same setup, the West Hartford students that identify as Black, Hispanic, or two or more races. In orange are students that identify as white. I left out of this graphic our Asian students. They perform generally at close levels to the students that are white, sometimes exceeding them on different tests, and varies based on the size of the group. And then we have, obviously, there are other racial categories that the state defines, and we have fairly small numbers, so those are not reflected. Again, in red is the comparison group at the state level. And as I said, in orange, it's white. And you can see still a sizable gap, less so than from high needs. It's an average of 35.5 points. But again, a great news story. That's down from last year being 38-point gap. And you can see that the size of the jumps that the groups made and how they're offset by jumps from the comparison groups. So in literacy, that in blue, that's a 6-point gain, offset by a roughly 3-point gain of the white peer group for a 3.3 overall net shrinking of the achievement gap for literacy. Likewise in math, it's a 4-point gain for our historically underserved, and a 2-point gain for their peers, their peer group, for roughly a 2% closing of the gap. And overall, it's a 2.5% closing of the gap when looking through the lens of race ethnicity. We attribute this to really a hyper-focus and a district commitment to working on cultural competence, to working on intervention, to paying attention to meeting individual students to, as Tom puts it, clear paths for all. So while we continue to recognize the road ahead, we're extremely pleased with the progress that the second year reports tell us. There's more information and additional resources available to the general public. And at this point, I'd open it up to questions that the board may have.
Thank you.
Thanks for the information. It's great. It's very good news. One of the things I love about what we do in West Hartford is when we see a success in one school, we move that to other schools as well. Have we had a chance to do some kind of dive into this to see what might be working well that we can export to throughout the district?
So absolutely. Obviously, the bulk of our almost all of our results represent the performance of students at both Conard and Hall. And there's some additional, I don't put up the separate Conard versus Hall statistics at this, but there is information that's in the report itself that demonstrates that these gains are happening on both sides of town. I would say that the communication that occurs not only among the content area supervisors, but the principals is at a level that, Tom will tell you, we've never seen. So they are sharing that information. I would tell you that Ann works dramatically closely with Monique Albani and Michelle Gravelin, Tom Polyalagopoulos and Chris Nystrom, who are our department supervisors. And I would describe them pretty much as lockstep. But maybe, Ann, if you have any insights into that question that you can offer. The short answer is yes, but maybe you'd like something better from Ann.
Well, I might be repeating a few of the comments that Paul has already made, but it's clearly a very strong team effort focused on the best interests of children. And people are taking the work very seriously. The professional development is very aligned. The leaders are working very closely, and I honestly have never seen principals of what you might say sometimes, opposite schools working so closely. So I think the short answer is it's a great team effort with people who are very much in step. And I've got to really also comment that the kids that we serve, the children we serve, are they're really trying very hard to take advantage of everything we have to offer. I'm really proud of them because they've had dramatic results.
If I could, one of the things too that makes this interesting and truly the team approaches and slightly more difficult to do a straight comparison. The elementary school, that teacher is pretty much with them all day. Whereas here, I'd love to say, well, this English teacher had tremendous results on writing. And that can happen where you notice somebody's had a dramatic impact. But it's also the 9th grade teacher, the 10th grade teacher, but it's not just the English teacher. Social studies, the writing that goes on in their history classes, the social studies classes, working with science. I mean, every time you write a lab report, that's a function of writing that's also a function of the SATs now. So it's a little harder to identify necessarily the one thing, so you got to think in a little bit bigger prism than just, okay, who's the teacher and what did that teacher do? And the math course that a student's taking that year may not relate to the brunt of the information on that school day SAT, depending on where they are. So, you've got to make sure, are we seeing a recency bias where kids that maybe are advanced beyond a course aren't doing as well on certain questions, and do we look at that? And that's something that I know Ann breaks down, we try to look at.
Thank you so much for the report, and it's always wonderful to see growth. So this is wonderful. But I do have a question about the high needs group, because I understand the way the state defines it, and your explanation being for the smaller districts. But we have students, it seems with a district of this size, I would love to see it pulled apart. Because I think that you could be someone who's economically well off, but you have you're a student with special needs or English language learner, and they're being lumped together. It seems difficult to tease out what's really going on. Do you get that data pulled apart? Is there a way to?
Certainly. So that data is, it's available this way, both publicly and for us. It is reported as a high needs subgroup, all clumped together as you described, and then it is separately reported for English language learners and separately reported for students with disabilities. The only place that's not separately reported for privacy reasons is socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so what I can tell you, having looked through that, the gains that you see, I mean, it's back to the same point. The gains, you see the disaggregated gains in the written report for Conard and Hall, and there are appreciable gains in both. It's not that one school is holding it up and the other school is lagging. Likewise, with the subgroup analysis, I can speak to at least students with disabilities and English language learners, and appreciate that there are good gains in both groups that contribute to that overall shrinking of the gap. That being said, especially I think your English language learner group gets a little bit smaller by the time you get 11th grade. So it's hard to report on any one thing with validity and connect it to specific efforts that you have. It can be simply 2 or 3 of those learners that are very strong. The bulk of your high needs performance is probably upheld, at least on the part that we can disaggregate, based on students with disabilities. And that's a good, that's a good news story by itself in terms of their improvement.
And Gretchen does go through with her staff and her department supervisors SAT performance. And that's something people don't necessarily think about, is that, yeah, they're aware of this information too. And they do take ownership of this because we want all of our students successful across all realms. So it is something that's disaggregated at the school level too.
And this might be worthwhile mentioning. I know it's in the written report, but maybe it's worth the highlight. Some of the areas, we disaggregate these in whether it be students with disabilities or other areas. I think we mentioned in the report some of the areas of focus that we had. In mathematics, it was on problem solving, and when you disaggregate down to the sub-scores, you see that's where we saw a jump in the overall score for students. And likewise, in English language arts, there was a focus on words and context, and that sub-score also saw the jump. So we see real tangible evidence of progress and results of our efforts happening. And it's just work for us to continue to do and to grow on. So we're very pleased with our initial outcomes.
Thanks, Paul. We're seeing some, what I'm gathering is a little more successes in English than math. And with the English as a second language and as diverse as West Hartford is, and kids, I forgot how many second languages are spoken. 70 languages spoken. That's a huge number, and we also know that math is, no matter what language, is still math regardless across the world. But English is obviously specific to certain countries. So why do you think that gap is greater in English than math? If you can help.
I'll take a stab and I'll let Ann jump in maybe with some specifics in terms of the work. One of the things you'll notice, English language arts is a holistic course. It's taught holistically. It can be approached holistically. What translates from one year to the next really becomes the complexity of the text, the complexity of the writing, things of this nature. Math is a sequential course. When we disaggregate our scores across the courses, truthfully, there aren't a lot of surprises. If you are, as a junior, in a pre-calculus, in an honors pre-calculus course, the statistics for hitting the benchmark are near to 100%, regardless of what side of town you're on. And that's clearly a function of the volume of the mathematics that you've been able to master by that time in your life, and of course the complexity of the math increases along with it. When you trace that back to grade level, math, which would you consider college algebra or algebra 2, that's where you start to see some of the real variability for a standard versus an honors. And in honors, you're not seeing a lot of variability. Again, you're seeing 100%, and so there's more variability there. And if you're behind a grade level in math, that's where you're definitely seeing the greater areas of struggle. So our effort for closing that gap in performance overall really has to do with focusing our work, I would say, at the late elementary, early middle school to make sure that we have as many students that stay on grade level, stay on target, because that simply increases their chances for success. But it's also, you know, it's an interesting lens that you want to give the data, because the interesting thing is we have if you look at the achievement differences, the gap is smaller in math than in language arts because it's a harder achievement, apparently, from what the data is telling us, to get to that benchmark score. Even the whole notion of I only need a 480 over here, but I need a 530 over there. So the bar is automatically raised higher. So you just look in right here. Our comparison groups are at a 90 percentile in English language arts versus a 70th percentile in math. And the sizes, you know, and then the gaps between the students differ accordingly. So it's, while you're saying math is a harder nut to crack, and that's true, our relative performance in math places us higher at a state level than does our literacy, even doing as well as we're doing in literacy. So it's really an interest, you know, multifaceted in terms of how you look at it. I don't know if you can add anything to that.
Could I jump in one thing about the 480 and the 530? Because it's been one of the, you know, having been there for these discussions when the College Board was setting those numbers, because it's been one of the more controversial things to, first of all, set them 50 points apart, because there was a misnomer that you're making math more important, saying you have to have a higher score to be successful in math. There was a tax that these tests are designed to fail kids. You saw those out there. And it's not. The College Board did a study, and it's just what the numbers were to have a 75% chance or greater of getting a C in your introductory coursework. And that number for math was 530, and for English language arts, 480. And there was a lot of pressure to lower the math number. And they just said no, because that's just what the numbers tell us from all kids going on to study. And it wasn't just at elite, it was everywhere. That was when they took the millions of students going and looked at it.
There's a pretty wide range of introductory courses that can be taken. I mean, you know, you're taking principles of macroeconomics, or you're taking, you know, intro to Western civilization. I mean, you know, so there's, I think, needs to be some sort of an understanding of what courses are being taken by these kids once they get to college. Are they taking tough courses?
Yeah,
courses?
they take all of them together, so it basically averages it out to kind of get a number, because it's not in the hundreds, it's in the millions of their research study. So it's I'm pretty comfortable with it afterwards, yeah.
And also, through this discussion, I didn't think of it prior, but how do we rank nationally against other New England towns? And I'm sure that we probably have that data. I'd like to see it now.
We don't, because SAT School Day isn't a national assessment where everybody takes it everybody doesn't take it. So, for example, our SAT School Day scores we feel are really strong. If you take any random Saturday assessment of the test, the scores go up, because it's just everybody taking it. So you can't make, because it's not everybody taking it necessarily. It's who's taking it, how many times are people taking it. So it's an almost impossible comparison, other than with those states that are doing it as school day SAT, which is a growing number. New Hampshire, Maine, Michigan, Illinois. So they're beginning, but those numbers, you know, I've seen some introductory numbers about it, but they haven't really made that comparison. So that's why it's a difficult comparison to make.
All right, so that's interesting. So then what about the Saturday SAT scores, and how do we measure up against the Derg Bs, against English and math for state level versus a national level, a New England level?
Well, I'll let Ann go back to this. The one thing I'd say is I'd be uncomfortable with that comparison of the general, because no matter what, we're throwing our school day SAT in with it. and there's so many variables.
Yeah, but that
that are
is the
tied
even,
in.
the outside of school SAT is the mean, really, because that's what's the college.
But here's why it's not, because somebody could take it in school day and take it there one time and get a 1540 and never take it again because they don't need to. So you're also culling out, so it's
I
a
guess-
real tough comparison to make.
And I get it, right? So numbers are numbers, and it's what you're evaluated on to get into college, correct? I mean, this is one
One of the metrics at many schools.
and different percentages for different schools, but I think we could all agree it's a pretty important metric for college.
Yes.
So regardless if they take it in school once, out of school, on a Saturday, the metric will still be the same, is because what are the colleges accepting on a national level to get into school? So if there is a 1285, if that's the number, to get into these schools across America, what is it that, how do we compare? So there is a comparison there, because that is the benchmark. This is a great benchmark, and it gives us a lot of tools, but there's a benchmark that gets us into college.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that in a variety of ways, because you'd also have to put the ACT in there also, and then you've got two test comparisons. Something we could look at and discuss, or you could look at it in terms of our students and where they're matriculating, and last year's results are very strong of where our students got into. Between the two, UConn.
That's not a hard, it's not a 1285 versus 1285 in Massachusetts. It's a 1285, I went to Villanova. I mean, it doesn't tell me anything. What the 1285 versus the national level would rank us among our group.
I know you want a hard number. You can't necessarily give a hard number, because what it takes to get into college X, Villanova, using that as an example, well, it depends on so many other things also. So you can have, our scored number at some places, you can pick out when you do the scatter plots of your kids on Naviance, and you guys are both doing that, and you'll see one that got in here and 15 that didn't get in there. It's like, but their score was so much lower. Well, what did they have? I mean, we don't know. Are they legacy? Were they an athlete? Were they an expert in the flute? So
again, I guess I'm not asking what college they went to. I think it's irrelevant. It's really just coming up with a benchmark that you can perform against your peer groups across the nation.
Well, I'd say 480 and 530 would be that benchmark.
Okay. I guess that's what I was asking. So
Yeah,
on a national standard, how do we?
Exceptionally well. I'm sorry if that's.
All
if
I
we
was
look
getting
at if we look at where our kids are and where we look at this, go ahead, Paulie. Yeah.
If you go to page 3 in your report, there's a national statistic which shows you that the benchmark evidence-based reading and writing mean score was a 502. Our district is at a 573. And in math, the benchmark national score is a 494, and our district is a 557. But to Tom's point, the national 502 and the 494, those aren't national school day SAT. That's national la-di-da-di everybody. Our scores are well above those national scores and go up from there if we were looking only at our Saturday administrations, which the SAT eventually, it's much later in the year because they have the multiple administrations of the test that are happening throughout this year. They'll put that out. We used to give our old SAT report provided you information on that along with the ACT, and we wanted to make sure because we have apples and oranges. Tonight we would talk about school day SAT, but that at least gives you a flavor for the comparison that right off of the hop, New England in general is outperforming, and the state of Connecticut is outperforming the national averages. So I think the best, to answer your question, the best way, looking at Durg B schools, school day SAT comparison to West Hartford, and again, those comparisons right here, right in those charts, are extremely favorable.
All right, I guess one more follow-up question. If only a handful of states are doing this, but the College Board is redesigning it, I guess my impression would be that they're redesigning the SAT for out-of-school Saturday SATs. And why would they be involved in state assessment SATs? I think I know the answer, but it's a question that I'd like.
Let me jump first. So there's only one SAT. The College Board redesigned it, past tense period. Anyone who goes to take an SAT anywhere, the school day SAT is the same SAT that Grace or Madeline would take on a Saturday.
So that, I guess that's where the confusion, the numbers, whether you take it in school or on a Saturday, or how many times you take it, there's a number out there that gives us.
So if I'm in another, I know where you're going. If
So
I'm in
there's
another
one-
state.
I was led to believe there were two separate tests now.
No. No.
Because there was the in-school test that we can't compare to a Saturday test, and they
So
took it
let me try to explain
You can't
that.
compare the results because it's different people taking it.
They take it different times.
No, it's different people because not everybody takes it. One of the best things about the school day SAT, the reason it's so great that the state pays for it, is now everybody takes it, whereas before, only 87%, or in West Hartford, it was in the 80 percentile, even took the test. And so now the opportunity that gives, and now the thought and the truth is, those kids that didn't take it before wouldn't score as high, average-wise, as the kids that were choosing to take it whose parents were or families were paying to take it.
In some states, well, outside of the New England region, you may only have 33% of your kids taking the SAT, and those 33% are going to be your top 33% in the school. So that's what Tom's describing, that with school day SAT, and it wasn't College Board doing it to Connecticut, it was Connecticut asking to be able to do this with the College Board, saying, we want this to be our state assessment. Our expectation for our schools are that all students are college and career ready, and so we want all students to take a college and career ready assessment. And the SAT is the name that everyone equates with that.
So can we get numbers that represent different states for New England that would compare us to our, so we have national scores here, and we have our district, and how do we compare to the rest of the country, to our New England counterparts? Because if there's a test out there, the numbers exist.
Well, as a comparison, basically, it's a good comparison. The PSAT and the SAT relate directly to each other. So the cutoff for national merit, semifinalist, Connecticut is tied for second highest in the country. So if we're the highest, if we're in the top 25 percentile of one of the top states, then I assume. But yeah, we can get a comparison by state. I just don't know that it's going to get you a fair comparison. Some states, the SAT isn't taken much at all. The ACT is the state. It's like flipped. Here, the ACT is a much smaller N of takers, whereas previously, Illinois, for example, was an ACT state where the SATs was a much smaller number. So actually now there's more ACT tests taking.
So the ACT is a benchmark to get into college as well?
Yes, it is.
As the SAT?
Yes.
Depending on the state you live in?
Not even depending on the state, just some states weirdly take one test more than the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, I got wrapped up on that one. One of the questions I wanted to ask, and I ask it every year, is that it's got to be 4 years ago, we saw a big dip in sixth grade mathematics. It was identified. I was wondering if these benchmarks in math, if you're following that group, if you will, and seeing if there's any anomalies still that exist or anything like that. It was a pretty large dip, and I just want to know if we're still tracking that.
The short answer is yes. We've been looking at the middle school dips in general. I'll be reporting in 2 weeks on what the changes are. And I know your question's more about that specific cohort, but I'll get to that. But in general, it's going to be another good news story, at least within mathematics.
Yeah, because we saw the good news in the last 3 years, actually. Because we saw a big dip, and then we saw an increase in level. And I'm worried about the big dip.
Yeah, in terms of that cohort group, so one of the other changes that occurred with the SAT that we talked about with the redesign And what Tom alluded to, what's coming up in October, is the administration of the PSAT, which now is given to 9th graders, 10th graders, and 11th graders. Those assessment results are on the same scale as the SAT, and there are benchmarks by grade so that you can know how you're tracking. I don't have specific numbers in my head, but certainly if we give, if you'd like, we can give a PSAT report and we can attack that very question about that individual cohort. But in general, that's our ability to tell how students are tracking as they move through the high school years.
I think that'd be great to identify that cohort, because it would give an idea of issue and how we solved it, and what we did to do that. And I think it might be great results, actually.
I would just add that I think, as Paul mentioned, we'll be able to give you some very good detail about that dip in general, beyond that cohort, to just what we're doing when we see any dip and how we're addressing it. And I think that will be coming up in just a little while. We'll have a lot of detail for you on that.
So my question is similar to, I guess, what everybody else asked, but more specifically to the historically underperforming racial group and analysis. And I noticed that, they're always sort of low or behind the other two cohorts. And I'm wondering, as we drill down further, what are we doing in the lower grades in order to improve that, so when they do get into high school where they are taking the PSATs and the SATs, that their scores can more closely align to the other two groups?
That's a great question, and obviously there's a significant work that goes into that. One of the things, I think you guys know a lot about what happens at the elementary level and our efforts at identifying kids for intervention. We've given a lot of attention, and I'll credit Ann and the supervisors that she's been working with. She's been giving a dramatic amount of attention all last year in reviewing and refocusing our intervention efforts at the middle school. We've identified at that level some new tools that we've put into place. They piloted them last year, put them into place more formally this year, that are not only giving us the flags for kids, but they're giving us the specifics on how we need to intervene instructionally with them. We've done a dramatic amount of work over this late spring of last year and kicked off the opening of school with our leadership teams, talking about shifts to our instructional practice and driving towards not just a student-centered model, but at the end of the day, the practices that make that evidence of student thinking visible, to make sure that we're really, not calling on the kid that knows the right answer, that we're identifying kids that need the help. We've also made some recent changes at the elementary level. There's been a new product out. We've used AimsWeb for years. They've totally revamped and revised that tool to have a tighter alignment to our standards. So between that, in the middle school, I didn't give it a name, it's called iReady. And the work that we're doing in general with teachers and instructional leaders on instructional practice, those are the big efforts that we're taking. And again, when I give some of those specific areas of focus a name, like in math it was problem solving, in language arts it was words and context, and we drill down and look this year, we see the change that it's made. So.
Thank you. You'll be shocked to know I have almost no questions, because everybody's asked all these great questions. I really want to underscore a couple of points, though. First of all, what's so impressive is that you do drill down on all these numbers. That we see the aggregates, but you're saying, okay, what about this subset and this subgroup and this subpopulation? And that's, I think, really where the changes are going to come. I mean, I think the changes so far are exciting. On the other hand, as Mark reminds us, they could be random class differences, right? So we have to see a pattern over several years to really know that what we're doing is succeeding. But it looks like, at least, that some of the interventions that we've started are having we're not going to see them for 12 years in a way, because we're starting them early on and then they have to get up to the SAT. So again, I commend you on everything you're doing. I think it's important, and you already know this, to make sure that we're doing lots of different things to make sure that we're not waiting all 12 years to see how well it's working. But it's incredibly exciting. I just had one completely separate question, which is, if I understood you correctly, the only way you can take the essay part is to take it on a Saturday. This has nothing to do with any of the scores. This just has to do with the equity question. One of the things that's so great about being able to take it during the school day is that not only that everybody can do it, but everybody does do it. So you can use this score for college. But what if you want to go to a college that wants you to do the essay, and then the reason you weren't going to take the SAT is you couldn't afford it or whatever anyway. So I'm just concerned, again, this has nothing to do with the scores because we've covered that, but
So-
I'm just worried about the equity part.
Two things. I'll start with the equity, but I want to cycle back. The short answer is, and it's not a West Hartford decision, it's a state decision. And I'm certain at the end of the day, the short answer is money. It costs more for the scoring and things like that, I would imagine, and it's a larger intrusion onto the school day and so on and so forth. But to answer your question about equity, the redesign of the SAT, and I don't work for the College Board, so I'm not trying to promote them, but the whole change was defined based on equity and providing greater access to the test for all students. Part of that is if you weren't going to take the SAT because of money, you can qualify for fee waivers to be able to do that on a Saturday. There are a greater number of free score sends for students. There is free instructional practice through Khan Academy. The blueprints of the test have been made available. So there's a dramatic amount of work that's been done by the College Board to address equity as an issue. And, Connecticut's decision to not have the essay because not all colleges require it, that's sort of a separate piece. In terms of, is this just a cohort blip? I just want to address that. I just want to make sure that there's clarity around that. Your point is well taken. This is only year 2 of data. We had a new baseline last year, so all we could do was compare ourselves to other towns and the state. Now we're able to look at our growth. But our growth, just to reemphasize this point, tripled the growth of the state, was 1.5 times the growth of our DERG. That's our measure of how this is more than just a blip for our kids. And it is our hope that our efforts continue to drive that. But when I look in, it's not just, we are not just looking in at, hey, how many of our kids met goal? We're digging down to see what are those areas where they succeed. Tom mentioned recency bias, and that was a comment from last year that I can recall making, that it was surprising our scores on the advanced math section were stronger for our kids who fell down than the algebra, and that was a recency bias. They were doing better on stuff they were probably being instructed in more closely in time than they were to things they may have forgotten. Those are things we pay attention to. Back to Dave's point, we have provided all of the principles, breakdowns by teacher, and we talk about instructional practice, and they're going in. So there's a lot of work that happens as a school district. We are being informed, as Tom said, and we are taking every piece of information we can from this to help try to drive continued improvement. So.
Thank you. I just want to be shamelessly political and say that part of the reason I think that we're all concerned about what works and what doesn't work is that we are looking at all kinds of financial pressures. And we need to know, unlike last year where we just didn't know things, we really need to know in advance what's working, what's not working, what should we be focusing our financial gains on. So I just want to commend you guys. I thought that was this improvement for a one-year improvement is really quite radically wonderful. So thank you both.
If I could make one commercial for parents and for kids, is that I've said Khan Academy every time I've been here to speak about this. parents are paying for courses, and sometimes they're paying for courses where the teachers having kids tie into Khan Academy. It is free. The College Board can look at all of the kids that go on and look at the metrics. You can tie your scores to it, and if you spend 20 hours, your scores go up on average 100 points. So kids that have spent 20 hours on Khan Academy at some point have seen that's the average growth, basically. It's stunning. It's free. It is, every parent and every child should say, man, and sometimes people think you get what you pay for, but with Khan Academy, really, please access it.
Thank you.
And a reminder, we have devices for people to check out Wi-Fi enabled just in case. they don't have
Absolutely.
one.
At all of our high school libraries, and now actually filtering down a little bit, we have 4G devices that kids can check out of the library.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the equity thing, too. I was just thinking when, there are waivers, for example, but it's embarrassing to have to ask for a waiver, and people might not, but things that are, I was just thinking about, I think it's in New York City where the school lunches are free for every child. That way, nobody has to say, I need a free lunch. So I'm not advocating for free lunches for everybody. I'm just saying that part of the equity issue is not making people step forward.
Chip would know. I think it's 70%. If you're 70% free reduced lunch, it becomes 100%. Is that right, Chip? Is it higher than that? Okay. All right. Yeah.
But anyway, just the equity of not making people have to ask. So I think that's great. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Moving on to the financial report. We have, I have a motion, I guess. Can I have a motion to approve the financial report?
So moved.
No, don't we make the motion and then we hear the report? No. I'm sorry.
Second.
Did I do that wrong? No. Okay.
It's fine. The world will continue to spin. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, as exciting as the SAT discussion was, we're just going to ramp up the energy level. It's going to be like Christmas, 4th of July, and Arbor Day all wrapped up into one. Okay. I'll cut right to the quick. The general fund ended with a surplus of $200,516, all of which was returned to the town. However, I do want to bring you down a couple of paragraphs under benefits where you'll see a large part of the surplus, in fact, $200,000 of it, came from the town's decision to lower our contribution for retiree health costs by $200,000. So, in effect, we basically returned $516 to the town. Still, I think that speaks to Chip's prognostication and his ability to land on the number that needed to be landed on. So, many kudos to Chip. Let me walk you through some of the other highlights. Salaries, we ended with a negative balance of $419,000. Obviously, over the course of a year, with the amount of movement that we have with teachers going out and so on and so forth, that's a pretty small variance comparatively. And then these are things that just happen. I think that we would also be remiss if we didn't note that we hired a few more teacher assistants. Okay, again, I think that was probably needed as needs developed over the course of the year. But at the end, it really wasn't that big of a swing. And I would say that a lot of that was due to what we'll also see down in benefits in the second paragraph, the $84,000 surplus. The district transferred the expense for the employee match provision from account 5211, which was under benefits, and put it in account 5191. It's really, it's a wash. Exactly. So that's really what's going there. But in general, benefits were positive, and a part of that was that the hybrid for new employees is coming into play. We're easing people off of the full ride that they were getting before, which is nice. So moving on to purchased services, we had roughly $49,000 surplus. That was a good sign, when you look at where we landed in transportation, we had a deficit of $159,000. That was largely driven by out-of-district placements. More buses were required for out-of-district placements, and not much you can do there.
Can I just interrupt you for a second to
Of
ask
course.
that is, in fact, we have to do what we have to do, right?
It is the
We have
law.
no control over that.
That's right. It is the law. Moving on to supplies, materials, capital outlay, we saw $168,000 surplus, roughly $168,000 surplus. Most of the savings came here. If you recall, last year we had a 5% holdback, but I've been assured that no one felt any pain whatsoever as far as supplies are concerned. So don't feel that we held back. And really, that $168,000 went to help pay for some of the teacher salaries. That's just, money is fungible, as we know. Moving on to our grant funds, we ended the year with roughly $659,000 in balances for state and federal grants. As you know, we don't leave money on the table as a public school district. Rest assured, we will spend it. As you can see, all those grant balances will roll over. We have until June 30th of 2018 to use them up. As per usual, the parochial schools in town who were granted money chose not to use all of their funds, so they lose. Moving on to special funds, the special funds ended the year with a total balance of roughly $1.49 million. That was down from that's down $124,000 for the fiscal year. The challenge there is that the adult education program, adult enrichment continuing education, lost about $24,000 for the year, but it's been losing money for a good while now, and that's it's part of what we do, and it's not, again, a huge number. The benefits there that are likely intangible, we're not measuring on a balance sheet, so I don't know if there's anything really to get overly concerned about there. Moving on to the tuition revenue account, obviously we see decreases in its balances. We had more expenses in the account. Rental expenses were a little bit lower, but overall the special funds are appropriately funded to meet the needs that they serve. So the last item in this financial report is my personal favorite, as you all know. It's the nutrition services discussion. And I had to pick myself up off of the floor during our financial examiners meeting. Dave threw some cold water on my face to wake me up, but it was all good because we wound up this year with a surplus of $34,000. Now, before we all get excited about it, remember, this all has been largely driven by our salaries. We've had that salary and the contract freezes in place. Eventually, that will go away. But the operating metrics are still not horrific, but not terrific. Student lunch count dropped by roughly 2%. Total sales decreased by 0.4%. A la carte sales have mostly level. And of course, we benefit from increased federal and state aid. We had about a 1.7% increase. We got higher reimbursement rates and more free reduced price lunch meals served. So that really wraps up the year past. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask me or Mr. Ward.
I have a couple of questions, actually.
Okay.
First of all, I'm just curious, and I don't know that you would know the answer to this, but I know that it says that we have the shortfall in the summer school enrollments in 2016. I just wondered, does anybody know what the 2017 numbers were? Are we still short?
We're still compiling that. That'll be in the first report as of September 30th.
I'm just sort of looking into the future. And the second question, and again, this is not a number question for you so much as a structural question. I'm delighted if we've bought more computers for people who might not have access, et cetera, but I also know that there's a lot of computer stuff that's being used in the school day, a lot of programs and stuff. Do we have any evidence that those kinds of programs are actually pedagogically positive? Do we know anything about them? are people using them because they're there, or is there evidence that they're actually more useful than like, writing stuff down on a piece of paper?
That's really not in my area of
Oh,
expertise.
I know, I was
You
just,
can-
that's what I'm saying, I don't know who to ask, but,
Paul you could ask that to Paul during another presentation, to Kerry, to Ann. All of our programs are vetted through our curriculum specialists, both in the townwide level and in the schools, or when teachers see a program, they want it, and then it's vetted, not just through Jared. It's not like okay, we'll order it. It does go through our own curriculum review process.
okay, so, because I'm all for spending more money if it actually makes sense, so that's, I wasn't
This
actually
spending
asking
would
you if
be-
you knew, but.
This spending would be more devices than
Okay,
licenses.
which is, yeah, no, that's great. And my last question is about nutrition services, if can I jump to that?
This is the United States of America. If you want to jump around, you are free to. Yes, by all means.
My question is, that according to the numbers, we have fewer enrolled students this year than last year. I thought we had 150 more than we expected. Is it even with that higher number, we have a lower number, or is that?
Yes.
Okay, so we're 50 down. We would have been 200 down.
Well, this is talking about last year.
So it
This
is.
is talking about 2016,
Right,
17.
yeah.
So it
Yeah,
is.
We
kids-
haven't
the
gotten to
kids-
2017, 18 yet.
Yeah, the new kids that have arrived here haven't eaten all of their lunches yet.
Okay, all right, that was, of course they haven't. It's amazing, yes. Okay, we're in a different year. Sorry, never mind. All right. Well, I'm just going to shut up now. Other questions?
I don't know who can answer this, and I probably don't need an exact answer, but student lunch count dropped by 2.2%, reduction in students, and I know this has been a year after year after year number. In the last 10 years, what do you think the student lunch program count has dropped from?
A lot. We used to be around 50%, we track that by percentage meal participation. In other words, the average daily meal is divided by the average daily attendance. It used to be around 50% on average. It's now down around 42 or 43% on average. And that's with a shift towards more free and reduced price lunch meals. We have a higher participation rate in those. So yes, it's been a substantial drop in the last 10 years.
So all the dancing vegetables and stuff that we heard, that actually hasn't worked, I take it?
Well, I mean.
I'm not asking you to comment on the dancing vegetables. I was just,
I mean, we have made, because we get state and federal aid, which is roughly a third of the budget, we have to follow the state and federal guidelines. The state and federal guidelines have made the food not as attractive as it has been in the past to students who, like most human beings, are most interested in fat, salt, and sugar, okay? And we basically have to take all the fat, all the salt, and all the sugar out of the food. So we have done, as has all the other districts across the country, done an aggressive job as possible, and with the help of the food manufacturers, because they work, they get hurt by this as well. So everybody's trying to find that magical mix. In school districts, as I've talked in the past, with the USDA was looking at, it's looking at school districts where 100% of the kids are getting a meal because it's free, like in New York City and these others, New Haven and Hartford. So they're really worried primarily about the quality of the food that those kids are getting. In our case, where it's an optional decision for 80% of our students, people are voting with their palates. And we're seeing a corresponding drop in sales. Now, those have been mitigated by various steps that we've taken. In other words, if we had there have been changes in the food compositions, the dancing vegetables, all the things that we're trying to do, and that's softened the blow, but it has not offset it in any shape, manner, or form.
Chip, I think I was just so stunned by the positive balance that I forgot to kind of dig in with some questions over at our meeting last Friday morning. So
Go right ahead.
I'll take the time to ask them now. Have you seen any decrease in school lunch participation on Monday because of meatless Mondays?
No, I'd have to take a look at that. But generally, I've taken a look at that. I didn't see that, it didn't strike me as a big thing. As a big change. But I can take a look at it.
Yeah, I would like to take a look at it because
I think that went through.
No. Oh, it's a thing.
I thought that was just a.
Yeah. I mean, it is on my school lunch thing, right. So I'm just curious, you know,
Okay.
I'm not taking
I
a
will
stance
have to get
for
back
or
to you.
against meatless Mondays.
I will have
but-
to get back to you on that.
Yeah,
We
okay.
have all the sales by every day and by every school, so.
Very good. 4 years ago, Chip,
Yep.
you and I worked assiduously on growing great schools and trying to get enhanced chicken, more salad bars into the mix. Do we have a sense 4 years on how that has panned out?
Well, I think they've, you know, I don't have the specific details. We continue to have salad bars at every school, every elementary school. It's obviously, it's a standard fixture at the secondary, at all of the secondary schools. It seems to be popular. I haven't tracked the detailed salad bar meals, but when we were doing that, when it was in the thick of things, yeah, we were doing an excellent job, and they were helping us to market that.
Yeah.
So it's been a positive. The chicken, we continue to provide chicken as a product. I don't think that specific product is used as frequently as it was in the past, which just was a higher cost product. We're limited in terms of what we're able to spend money on.
Yeah, I mean, and I recall that there was a lot of momentum initially, you know, with the GGS folks, you know, really heavily marketing the salad bars and getting volunteers up, and it would be a shame if there was momentum lost. So I was just curious to see if there was still that momentum.
There still is, because the salad bars, the elementary schools are not staffed by our staff. They're staffed by volunteers.
Okay, good.
And I'd remind all of you, if you want to go in and have lunch, love to have you do that. Who went last year? You went with Mark, yeah.
So interesting, an interesting statistic about the 100% free and reduced lunch, and albeit this is about 5 years old from when I last looked at it, the waste of food versus 10 years ago and 15 years ago is much greater, significantly greater. And they measure that by tonnage. So, again, you know, this, as you indicated earlier, Chip, the hands of big government that have changed the nutritional values lunch program in our schools has suffered for kids actually enjoying a good meal. And a lot of foods gets wasted at that 100% free and reduced lunch as well, and we see it here by kids just not eating it, so.
Mark, I had a chance to visit Charter Oak's composting program at lunchtime, and it happened to be on a salad bar day. And it was interesting. It was great to see all the composting going on, working with the kids to make sure they put the food in the one bin and the cardboard in another, etc. But then somebody pointed out to me, look at the amount of food that's being thrown away. So I think, Jay, your question, we've got sales, and Mark, consumption.
Yep.
And that's interesting if we could.
Well,
put
so
those
that
together.
was, so when we were all at Charter Oak last year, and I can't recall off the top of my head what it was for, but it was either a teacher or a volunteer there who approached us and said, you don't understand how much food is getting wasted here at this school. And, you know, that to me really set off alarm bells, because I think, you know, on one level you're wasting food, but number two, you're looking at these kids, some of whom, this might be their only opportunity to get a square meal. And for them to not get it because they don't like the taste of it, I think, to me, is unconscionable. It's very sad.
So I could talk on a level, I think on an expert level, on just milk consumption. You know, they've taken out whole milk 2% and some even 1% out of the school system, where it has to be skim milk, skim chocolate, and if you know, chocolate is inherently has fat in it, and when you make it zero fat, it's fake chocolate, and it doesn't taste good. And we found that the declining consumption of milk over the last 20 years has been significant. Because sometimes culturally, there's cultures out there that grew up on whole milk. When they come to school, they're drinking skim milk, and they don't want it. There's a lot of other factors too, temperature and things like that. The waste in the milk by gallons is because the kids aren't enjoying the taste anymore, and they're not having a good experience in a school lunch. And, you know, a crazy idea, and I mentioned it before, but if we did not take the reimbursement, obviously we're looking at numbers that are going to hurt us by the state and things. But if we were ever in financial times where you wanted a return on investment and you did not take the federal standards and state standards and you had your own school standards, I bet you that we would see significant lunch digestion and consumption and actually increasing the amount of lunches that we do. And then there's a return on investment there. Because if you're paying for good lunches, I think that there's school systems that do it. Private school systems don't get any federal reimbursement. I'd love to see their numbers.
Their prices are a little higher than ours.
I understood, and I get it, and
They spend a little bit more on the food per unit.
Yes, they do,
than we do. Just a tad.
And I've had I've been in almost every school system in the state, private and public, because of the milk industry, and you see what they're eating out there and the consumption, and it's almost like a clean plate club, if you will, because the food's so good. So just things to think about.
But I think we have noticed this, and when Chef Tim came and introduced himself, he's got his eyeball on this. He hasn't had a chance really to get in and make some changes, but I can say that he's aware of it, and I look forward to seeing the changes.
Just a quick question, just on the actual financial report where we have those months where we have some negative numbers, what is that attributed to? Is that?
Can you give me a specific example?
Well, you have September, negative 75,000, February, negative 1,000. Can those be attributed to those days off during school, or?
Oh,
No?
so on the nutrition
Yeah.
page? Yeah, that just gives you the monthly profit or loss. In September, it's always a loss because we have, we pay for salaries for our full-time employees over July and August, and we pay for the benefits costs for over 2 months. So, and there's the startup costs in the first part of the school year. So September is always a loss, and then the other months are based on how many vacation days there are and such. And, the goal is to, we ended up basically overall break even, which was really excellent.
Other questions? Okay, ready to vote to approve the motion? Okay, all in favor of approving the financial report for the period ending June 30th, 2017, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are good to go. Thank you. Does that, I know, it was very exciting. And so Dave, are you up next? Is that, next month? Yeah.
Next month, yes.
Okay.
I'm on.
The
Thanks.
Set your
competition is heavy.
DVRs.
Tune in.
Set your
Exactly.
DVRs.
Well,
It's going to be huge.
He set the bar high, so, okay. We're going to now approve the minutes for September 5th. You got revised minutes, and actually there is one very small typo. Can we do that just right here? Just say we're going to, okay. On page 3, buses should have one S, or that is 2 S's rather than 3, or B-U-S-E-S. So,
Can you be more specific as to where on page 3?
Yeah, it's right.
Oh, after 93 buses, right, okay.
yes. And that goes to Carol, total credit for spotting that one. So with that amendment,
Maddie has a question.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Also on page 5, my name is spelled M-A-D-D-Y, just for future reference.
That's the worst, so sorry.
It's okay. I might find it within myself to forgive whoever did that.
Well, my sister, who's also a Maddie, would be very offended, so I applaud your maturity in accepting it. Okay, so with those 2 changes, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes? Second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes from September 5th, 2017, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, surprisingly, the ayes have it. Okay, moving on to information and reports. Board members, have anything to report? Okay.
Listen, I leave you over under, so. I had the pleasure of going to both Hall High School and KP's curriculum night, and I was pleasantly surprised on how well organized they were, and what an exciting bunch of teachers I met, and it was a great experience. And I just wanted everyone to know that it was really well done, and it's great for parents to meet the teachers, and they were just so interesting this year. It was very welcoming.
So I unfortunately missed the Sedgwick welcome picnic. I was in New Orleans. I couldn't make it. But I made sure that I was there for the truly important function of curriculum night last night at Sedgwick. And Andrew and his team did a wonderful job. They should all be commended. I only got lost twice, but that's on me, not them. Let's not kid ourselves. But, we really got to see close up how the kids' day went. We really got to see how the team structure worked, and it really seems that at least Team Cornell, for that matter, has a very cohesive team that works well together. So I am looking forward, and my son is looking forward to his 3 years at Sedgwick upcoming.
I have to jump in with Bristow then. And I went to their open house and barbecue, and it was fantastic. It was wonderful seeing so many people together. And the barbecue was really special to have that outside, have them grilling and really building community amongst everyone there. It was wonderful. And then I also, I'm ex officio on the West Hartford Foundation for Public Schools Board, and they had a mom's fundraiser on Saturday and Sunday, and it was wonderful. It was at Hamilton Heights. And on Saturday, there was a band, there was food and other crafts and items, and just beautiful moms. And the proceeds will go to the foundation, which impacts all children all students throughout the district. So it was a very wonderful event, and I was just happy to be a part of it, and thank you for anyone who supported it.
Well, now that you're going, I just have to say about the mums sale that this was actually begun last year when the Hamilton Heights contacted us and said, we would like to partner with the schools. Who can we contribute to? And we suggested, rather than a particular school, contribute to the West Hartford Foundation. And so and I was delighted to see that they really did. And it really was, for those of you who were lucky enough to get some mums, it really was beautiful. So, and so I think they're going to do it again. That was really good. Other praise for the...
Sure, since you asked. Yes, I also, as a father, went to Conard High School's open house, and my wife had assigned classes, so I got to see teachers for each of the 3 kids, and that was really neat to see the differences. And also, I agree, just a super job of coordination in getting us all around and rushing us through the hallway so we can experience what the kids are going through on a daily basis. And that was greatly appreciated. I also got to attend Conard's Principal's Coffee this morning, a great way to learn about what's going on within the school as well. And I encourage everyone to take an opportunity to visit one of those with whoever your principal is.
Thank you. I just want to say on both curriculum nights, Carol and I, the two now the empty nesters, are quite depressed. But it's okay. See, the school's prepared them so well, they're now gone. Our children are gone.
I'm having 3 kids in school, so you can do one of them.
Wow, all right. Fair enough. That's right. Rather than, okay, one-on-one rather than zone defense, right? Okay. Maddie and Grace, who gets to go first?
Good evening, everyone. So I'll start off by saying we had our first home football game this Friday, and I went, and it was so much fun. It was a huge success, and the senior class board always raises so much money at those games with their food sales. I want to say there was like about a 500 student turnout, so it was a smashing success, and that just really goes to show our school spirit and our school pride. Again, we noted how we had our open house last week, and we're getting a lot of great feedback from that. We also have September 27th at 7 p.m. in the Conard High School auditorium. All students and parents are invited. Kathy and Chris Sullivan are sharing their stories on substance abuse and drug addiction, so that is something special. Sponsored by the Hall and Conard PTOs and the War Chief Council and CASAC. Additionally, senior parents are having their Safe Grad meeting tonight. So they're meeting as we speak right now in the Conard cafeteria to organize Safe Grad for June. And then also seniors are starting to have their one-on-one meetings with their counselors. And we had senior planning night last week with our parents. So this just makes me reflect how fortunate I am to be in a school system where we have a support system and people guiding us through it. I know my cousin is in another town in Connecticut, and she's going through this nitty-gritty process of college applications without any people guiding her through it. So that's just a little note just to show thank you for all of that support for the West Hartford Public Schools. So that's it from Conard. We're doing great. Thank you.
Thank you. So a lot of the things that are happening at Conard are also happening at Hall. After the usual hectic adjustment period, students at Hall have began the year strongly. The Student Association, which is like the student government, which I'm a part of, is planning Fall Fest and is looking to gear it towards not just Hall, but this year also towards the community, including middle schoolers and elementary schoolers. So on October 14th, there will be live music, a dunk tank, a bounce house, arts and crafts, and lots of food, and that's open to families and whoever would like to come. Hall is also raising money for hurricane relief, and the 40% of the Student Association's profits will be donated, and other clubs are also organizing various fundraisers. Hall sports teams have been doing great, and especially the cross-country team, which his daughter does a great job on. The boys and girls cross-country teams both won the Wickham Invitational, which they usually win. The freshman school counselors are visiting freshman study halls and leading freshman seminars where they are taught study skills, time management, and self-advocacy. And I think it was my year that it was a pilot year, and it was really successful. And I learned a lot of skills that year that helped me to become a successful student. So I think that that's really helping them get adjusted to school. And so school is now in full swing, and this year seems very promising for both the students and the school itself.
That's great. Thank you. You reminded me that when I was in 8th grade, our social studies teacher told us, you are all going to fail out of high school. You are not prepared for high school. I spent the whole summer worrying. So I'm really glad that Hall is not taking that approach and is instead encouraging you to go forward. I had a terrible summer that summer. Anyway, thank you both. Are there requests? Oh, there's an announcement of future meeting dates. Tuesday, October 3rd, here, the very same place, the very same time, 7 p.m. And again on October 17th. Same bat time, same bat channel. Any request for future agenda items? Comments from visitors? Everyone's fallen asleep. Okay, there's no executive session, so I just want to wish everyone a very sweet and happy new year. And we are officially adjourned. Oh, we have to move to, we're not officially adjourned. We are unofficially adjourned until we have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Go ahead, Thor.
Second.
Call for the vote? Well, you got to call for the vote.
I thought that was it.
No.
No, we actually have to vote.
Yeah.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Thor, go.
There it is.